Welcome to the IT Experience podcast. We're here to guide IT and global business services professionals in navigating experience management, focusing on how to optimize budgets and drive better business outcomes. Join us as we discuss the trends, tools, and strategies with top industry experts that are transforming the future of service delivery in large enterprises. This podcast is brought to you by Happy Signals, the leading experience management platform for IT and global business services.
Hello and welcome to this very special session of the podcast, of the YouTube channel, of wherever you are consuming this content. We have with us the esteemed Sir Roy Atkinson, who has been kind enough to join us today to speak about the 2025 trends. Welcome again to the Happy Signals show, Roy Atkinson.
Well, it's great. Always good to talk to you at Happy Signals, and you're looking well this morning, Sakari, so great to be here.
Thank you. And just before we click the record, we were saying that we shall be very formal, or shall we be casual, but
let's be formal.
Old friends now. This has been an interesting year, wouldn't you say? 2024, we have seen some nice movement that maybe then points the direction for 2025. And for this show, we had a meeting before recording today, and we were discussing sort of what are the trends that we could be highlighting. And one of the things that then came up as we were speaking is that maybe the points of view that you have found and that we have found actually are not quite the same. So in today's episode, we're actually going to be looking at 2025 as potentially the year of contradictions. And maybe the first topic that we'll dive into is about budgets. So Roy, you had found some interesting statistics about budgets for 2025. Would you like to start with those, and then we can go to the statistics that may contradict them?
Yeah, it always, at the beginning of a year, you wonder, is your budget going to make it to the end of the year, right? You plan your budget one year, and then you start it in the next, and you say, okay, are we doing enough? Do we have to make adjustments? And this year, the reports on spending are kind of a normal curve, right? There are some who say they're going to be spending a lot more. There's some who are going to be spending less, and the big bulge is in the middle. And about 40% of IT leaders told Forrester that they're expecting budgets to increase, but not a lot. 5 to 10% maybe, which is, not insubstantial, but it's not a big increase for the amount of change that's going on in the world of technology these days. It's not a big increase. About 8% is said that they're going to go over 10% increase, and about 9% are going to stay the same or decrease slightly. So that's the outliers, and then you have the bulge in the middle. Software makes up about 20% of the budgets, and there's going to be overall spending there is going to increase, and I think we know why, and we'll talk about that later. There are certain components of modern software that might be very important in future discussions. So it's going to be really interesting to see what's coming this year. But you said you had heard some, or Sammy had heard some information about budgets decreasing. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so this is actually an interesting point, is that when Sami Kallis, our CEO, went to the United States last month, and actually this was less than a month ago, but he went to an ISG conference in Dallas, where he was speaking to people from the IT industry. And they were expecting that when it comes to specifically to IT support, so service desk, those costs were expected to decrease by as much as 50% in the coming years. And I think that this creates a pretty interesting segue to the software component that you referred to as well, that might be increasing the budgets, which is AI. I mean, what is the role of AI? We know that and the thing that maybe the expectation is in the service desk world is something that, for example, Klarna, the Swedish financial company, had noticed it, that they replaced something like 700 people from their support services, customer-facing support services with AI, and yet we're able to keep the same customer satisfaction while doing that. So there is an interesting piece around AI, and I think there's a lot of contradictory information there as well. So if we jump into this, how do you see this? Like, what would be, speaking about AI becoming more prevalent before we speak about why it might be less? So maybe I'll throw it back to you. Budget increases.
So there's a couple of things that we have to bear in mind when we talk about AI. There's a whole lot, actually, we have to think about. But one of the things is that when we talk about AI adoption and so forth, it's pretty tricky to talk about. It's a slippery topic. And the reason for that is that when you go out to buy new software, you're not buying AI. You're buying the new version of the software, and the AI is embedded in it. So it's really tricky visibility-wise. Are you buying AI? Are you buying the next version, which also has things like security updates and better functionality and all the other things that companies try to build in? But when you look at just the adoption of the AI stuff, like using copilots and the various and sundry facets of it that are available today to employees and so forth, Jeremiah Stone, who's the CTO over SnapLogic, says that we're starting to see detailed, specific return on investment from early experiments. We know that just about everybody was running experiments and pilot programs and that type of thing over the last year or year and a half. So to continue to grow, he said, leaders need to intend and extend their efforts into digital transformation. And that is going to cost money, right? And another thing, another element of this that's tied directly to AI is that you have to train people to use it correctly. Not everybody knows how to write a good prompt for AI. Not everybody knows how these things function to assist them. And so there's going to be a certain amount of training involved that's going to cost money. So they're going to be throwing more money at that side of things. It's going to hit the people and the training and the ways of working, which are going to be different. And that's an important thing. We talk about that too, the ways of working. And one of the key things, and we've talked about this for, as you know, I've been talking about this particular thing, AI and automation, for a long time. And one of the things that I'll remind folks is that when you automate or when you use AI to resolve the simple things first, you're taking the simple work away from the service desk folks, and you're leaving them with the complex work, which takes more time, which takes more effort. And so that also tends to complicate their lives. In addition to getting used to new things, and AI changes all the time. It's learning, and it changes the responses and changes its capabilities. And those folks have to learn about that, and they also have to handle those more complex requests and issues. So life is changing, and it's changing rapidly.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because we had this example where we were looking at like what type of AI is actually becoming more common. And as you said, that they're becoming embedded components of existing software. But at the same time, one French guy that I was speaking to, and that podcast episode will come out later, he said that sort of boring AI is the best AI. And for example, in the service desk context, which is the reality for many of the listeners of this show as well, is that AI, at the same time as it has through automation decreased the number of simple tickets for the service desk agents to solve, that has also been helping the service desk agents in both the hard skills and the soft skills as they are solving the tickets. So you had some great examples on that. You really just go through one example or a couple of examples of how AI is helping agents today to do their work better when they are actually solving these issues.
Well, certainly one of the direct ways is by creating documentation that's more assistive, right? One of the technicians who used to work for me had a habit of not documenting work. And in order to close a ticket or resolve a ticket, you had to put something in the body of the documentation. And he would put things in like, made some changes. And that was it. Not at all helpful. But when you have Gen AI present in the systems, it will summarize the conversation that you just had with a user, whether that was a voice conversation or whether it was text or email, however it was done. Now you've got a summary in a format that you can choose, which it makes it far more useful for people looking back at the future, helping to create your knowledge base. That's one way that it assists. Another way it assists is directly. You have AI coaching that can actually be in the agent's ear or in their screen, helping them find the right solution, use the right language for a customer that's upset or getting angry or frustrated. Using sentiment analysis, it'll say, calm this person down. You might want to take a breather here and think about, have a sip of coffee and try again, whatever it happens to be. But that coaching is present as well. So training, coaching, going hand in hand, and then increasing the accuracy and availability of a good knowledge base, which is a tremendous help to people, especially in those complex cases where somebody at a level 2 or level 3 has created a knowledge article for them, and being able to access it almost instantly and get the right information.
And I think that brings us nicely to the third point that we're looking at today is AI adoption. Is AI adoption in 25 expected to become more or less common? Do people adopt AI tools more or do they adopt them less? And I can imagine that in the case of, for example, the service desk agent that was change some things into the notes, I mean, he doesn't really need to change his behavior because AI is complementing his shortcomings by filling out things that he didn't have the habit of doing. And I see the same thing behavior in myself is that there are certain tasks when it comes to analyzing bigger bodies of text or trying to wrap my head around a little bit more complex problems is that it's easy to get that initial help from AI to summarize things, which just saves a lot of time. It doesn't take away from the actual work that needs to be done using your own intellect and using your own skills, but it does take away some of that time-consuming but less value-added work. So what's your thinking around AI adoption? Will we see more of it or less of it? Because there is also this thing where have we already been at the top of the hype cycle? Do some people feel actually discouraged by the capabilities of AI? Are we dropping into the thing where people think that it's just a nice party trick, but it doesn't actually have any impact on individual productivity or especially on an organizational level? What are your thoughts on AI adoption?
I think that we have certainly gone slightly over the top of the hype cycle. Thank goodness, because it's been nothing but AI for the last 18 months or so, as I'm sure you're aware. And now it's becoming part of the equipment and systems that are used. All the companies are including AI capabilities even in their hardware now. They're including chips that are of a different description and so forth. Apple Intelligence is now available. Microsoft is putting copilots in every product that they're providing. It's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. And again, it's in the background to some extent. We don't realize that we're using it unless we're asking for it. But having these tools available, it's like using a calculator, right? Oh, I don't know how to multiply 23.5 times 100.4, so I'm going to use my calculator. It's the same type of thing. You have to understand that it's a multiplication problem. As you said, that's using your intellect, but then using a tool to get at the actual hard facts. something like 65% of organizations are using generative AI now. That's doubled since last year.
Wow.
And so that suggests that the percentage is also going to increase next year. Will it be that dramatic? I don't know if it'll be that much, but about 25% of enterprises are going to be deploying Gen AI agents of some sort, according to those who know more about this than I do. And business leaders, according to what they're telling companies like Deloitte, they expect to use generative AI for low-value tasks, right? There's the simple things that are going to, save time, as you said. The big question for us, I think, is, we can save a lot of time. I recently gave a keynote talk, and I asked a question. I said, if using the summarization capability of Gen AI, you can save 3 minutes in the course of resolving someone's ticket or case or problem or request, that could be an hour a day, right? So now, what are you going to do with that hour a day? What are you going to do with it? Is it going to be time for relaxation? Is it going to be doing more high-value work? And what is that high-value work? I mean, we've been saying that for a while. What's the higher-value work? And I think that's the question. What can we do? What can we improve? What can we plan? What can we execute better with the time that AI is going to save us? That's the key.
That's so interesting. I mean, the question about what is high-value work.
But now I got you thinking,
don't know.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what would be, I think it's quite easy to instinctively say that, high-value work, I would be using it on this. Then if you think about the reality, especially now in today's hybrid work, if a specific set of tasks or outcomes are expected of me or anybody else in the workplace, and AI helps me to do that in 6.5 hours or 7 hours or 8 hours. If my usual days used to be 1 hour longer, is it actually better for my longer term success and contribution to the enterprise to not work during that hour, but to get quality rest, take care of my health, take care of, everything else? So high value work, what this liberates, I don't remember who said it, but I've seen a few people say that maybe one of the things that AI might be leading us towards is actually a much shorter work week, which is something that even some countries are experimenting with. Is a 4-day work week actually more productive or as productive as a 5-day work week because of the recovery time that people get in between? But
I think that's an interesting question. I think there's some good research, and I think it's Iceland that's got pretty much a dominant 4-day work week. The only trouble is that nobody understands Icelandic, and so they can't talk about it.
But this comes back to actually an interesting thing, about understanding humans, whether it's about language or otherwise. So if you think about now, 2025, and there has been a lot of technological progress, do we think that, this is point 4, does the value of the human experience, will it become more important or less important in 2025?
That is an ever fascinating question, and it depends on how people decide to spend that time, right? Are we going to spend more time with our families? Are we going to spend more time doing caretaking for elderly folks in our homes? Are we going to be spending more time participating in activities that our children are doing? And I think we answered some of those questions when the pandemic hit. People bolted for home, and we had been working from home or doing hybrid work. We've answered some of that. And I think that now, I wrote something a while back, about a year ago or so, called There Are Two Kinds of Hybrid Work. And one of them is cutting out the commuting a few days a week, working from home sometimes, working in the office sometimes. And the other kind is working with an AI partner. and that's another kind of, it's human and artificial software, whatever, however you want to term it. Some people get upset with the term AI because it's not really intelligent. It's algorithms and gizmos in the background that make things happen, decision trees. Yeah. But we have got to learn to work with these new tools, just as we learned, well, you didn't, but I had to learn to work with computers, right? Mm. And make the transition from using things like typewriters and these, whatever this is. Remember this device here. So there's a tremendous amount of change, and part of that is that I think you put your finger on something about getting them more rest, and I think that there's going to be an increased demand for that battery recharging function because the pace of change and the amount of change is so incredible. Now it leaves you reeling from the amount of change that you have. So it's an open question. Let's see where this goes. Fascinating world, isn't it?
That is, I hadn't thought about this before, but what you're mentioning there, sort of the complexity of change and the speed of change, if I would, for example, think about some of the more simple tasks, if I would be working around the house, let's say I'm doing garden work or I'm doing housework, I mean, I could be doing 10 hours of it and the 14 hours remaining will be well enough to recover from it. But actually, like when it comes to knowledge work, and especially when it comes to more complex problems as the world changes, I might actually be spontaneously, and this has no research behind it, but it's just spontaneously, I feel like maybe the more complex and changing environment and the knowledge work that is being done within it actually requires more recharging, because it doesn't leave you the moment you put down the tools. It stays with you. So it takes longer time to get it to actually start the recovery. But
it's a different kind of exhaustion.
Yeah.
Right? And for those, anybody out there who's ever suffered burnout, you know what kind of exhaustion it is.
Yeah.
And it's not fun.
And maybe that actually is a good point, that when it comes to understanding, do people actually perceive the changes in technology, the changes in capability of AI and the different tools that we are bringing to them in the workplace? If you don't ask them what their experience is with those different tools, do you really understand it? I mean, it's like, it's always, these things, like when it comes to productivity and well-being at work, there's been plenty of studies around like what influences it. But if you don't know what your people are feeling about the services that provide, no matter how technically proficient and advanced they are you able to catch those trends in time to avoid either disaster or to capitalize upon the positive trends when they start to grow based on assumptions? Because without asking people, I mean, that's one of the basic premises of happy signals, is that if you don't ask, the experiences will still be there. It's just that you don't know about them.
That's exactly right. And I think it's the most recent article of mine that you folks have on your website now. It's about how there's a disconnect between the upper management of a lot of companies and the workers in terms of choosing the technologies that they're going to use. The senior folks say, yeah, they're going to love it. When in fact, the people who are using the products day to day, not so much. But if you don't ask, you'll never get an answer, right? And sometimes it's something very simple and visible, and sometimes it's something that you never would have thought of, and maybe the person who's doing the work hasn't even thought of it. They haven't articulated it because they don't recognize it until you ask. So there's an element of that too. We have to, and you know, my mantra is ask the people who do the work. Yeah. You know, it is, I remember seeing, having lunch with a friend, and across the street, there was a construction project going on. They were redoing the sidewalks, and they were putting in a new, street light. When they were putting the street light directly in front of the door to a store. And it was just, it just looked crazy. People were going to have to kind of, do a swerve to get into the store. And I was imagining the worker. Now, I did work construction at some time. I don't know how this is. I imagine that somebody who was attaching that streetlight in that position said to their boss, "Are you sure this is where this is supposed to go? Because that looks a little weird, Hey, you don't get paid to think, pal. Just put the streetlight in." That's a real scenario that happens over and over and over again. And I think that we need to do less of that and more of what? You said what? And, do the Gemba walk, listen to the people, especially during times of rapid and complex change, because they're going to tell us what it is that's going to make them more efficient or at least keep them producing at the current level. There are those out there. There are some recent surveys, really recent surveys that are saying that employees are less efficient now because they have to do extra work to learn how to use the AI components or backtrack when they go down the old rabbit hole instead of the new rabbit hole. And, they're trying to relearn, and it's making their lives more complex and a little more difficult. So are we really making things easier? Probably not right off the bat. We have to learn.
And that is a really good connection to the fifth point and the last point of these 2025 predictions, the productivity paradox. Will the new technology, like AI, increase the productivity or decrease it? And I think that's a really good point, that it isn't a magic wand that will just, you snap your fingers and all of a sudden everybody in the organization knows how to prompt these generative AI tools, know how to utilize the latest capabilities. And I remember this one customer that we spoke to was speaking about sort of comparing different ways of completing a task by purely comparing the feature list or the capability list of a tool. And just, I remember the sentence that she used. She was just, capability isn't the same as usability. And I think maybe in the productivity paradox, when we think about AI and what these new technologies, not only AI, but other advancements as well, the capability of these tools doesn't actually relate to the usability. Therefore, the reality of what they bring to the organization. Do you want to maybe a little bit shine a light on your thoughts around this productivity paradox and what it means?
Years ago, and I mean lots of years ago, probably 20 or even more years ago, there was a massive study about people using word processing software. And what they found in that study was that people were only using a very small part of the capability of word processing. How many people do you know that use Microsoft Word, for example, that use styles?
Probably
right?
none.
The designers the publishers use it, but most everyday workers say, "Oh, okay, that's the font. Great, terrific."
Yeah.
They don't, plan a document, how it's going to look and turn on different styles at different points. People who publish stuff do that. And 18% of the capability was being used and the rest of it wasn't. So I think what you say about AI is the same, or about the new components of software, is the same. It's going to be how much of the capabilities are going to be nice lists on somebody's wall and never be used. Will people actually be taking up the technology and putting it to work for them? So that's one thing. Another thing is that employees are going to be spending time, spending more time reviewing and moderating the AI-generated content. which is going to add to the workloads, because you don't want it just to sound like I am a robot as you read it, and there's no tone, no differentiation. There's going to be a learning curve for people, as we said. This is an interesting point. Some employees are being asked to do more because of generative AI technology. Well, you can write 400 pages today instead of 20 because you can just use Gen A, just use the AI. What's the problem? That's interesting. Well, wait a minute. I have to moderate it. I have to think about the topics. I still have to construct something here to make this all work, even if I use Gen AI to do a lot of the work for me. And then, there's also, we use the phrase new ways of working. Well, people have to change the ways of working in order to take advantage of these new capabilities. And people don't change that easily. Just that phrase that I've used over and over again, or a sentence. It was a big change being pushed out across a large insurance company. And the day after the change went live, somebody called the service desk, and this is an end user speaking. And they said, yesterday I knew how to do my job. Today I do not. And it's an incredibly profound statement, right? Because that's how change affects people. And this change that we're talking about now, where you're giving up some of your, what we consider to be mental capacity, you're deferring that to the capabilities of some software that you don't understand. It's an interesting effect that it's going to have on you to try to adapt your ways of working so that it will actually be productive.
So you have decades of experience within the IT field. My expectation is that some of the people listening to this episode will be wondering, okay, so what's my practical takeaway from this? Maybe I'm new at my job, and maybe I just got promoted to being the chief digital officer and CIO, whatever. Maybe I'm a team manager. What would be your advice as people go into 2025 and they are being asked the question, what are your proposals on how we can improve in this coming new year? Do you have any sort of like off the bat recommendations, like what should be the considerations or questions or recommendations that these people consider?
Certainly, you need to think through things from the perspective of the person that's going to be consuming whatever services you're offering, right? That's basically what you folks are all about at Happy Signals. But it should be a component of everybody's work. As years ago when I was doing consulting work with Apple, one of the stories, the internal legends that was told at Apple was, if Steve Jobs ran into an issue when he was working, he would call the regular consumer helpline. He didn't reach out across the organization and say, hey, Tony, get over here and fix this. He would call the helpline. One of the reasons he did that was so that he had the experience that Apple customers had.
Wow.
And it's very insightful. I mean, most executives, especially senior executives, don't do that. They've got I've always had mixed feelings about VIP service desks, that type of thing, where your job is to take care of the senior exec. Well, okay, but that means that they're out of touch with what actually is going on. They're running into an issue is not the same as everybody else's. And I think it's incredibly important to have a sense of what people who are doing the work are up against in every respect, whether it's learning new ways of work, or whether it's reporting an issue, or whether it's getting assistance. And also that provides, even without the wonders of Happy Signals, even if you just are paying attention to the service desk, that's an amazing source of business intelligence because it can tell you what's going wrong, what people are upset about, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, even without the insights that ITXM provides. And we're in thorny territory, Sakari, as we've talked through all of these different things today. And we have to be careful that we're not ignoring things. So planning is really careful. Somebody I know at a company called MathWorks used to be at Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts and was designing an AI-assisted end-user assistance program. And one of the things that Chris did was he made sure that at no time was it difficult for a person who was engaging with the system to not to be able to access a human.
Yeah.
Is it difficult to access a human? Every single point in the system, no matter where they were, they could one click get to a human. And that is really important because sometimes you just need to talk to somebody to explain it or to explain it to yourself by having a conversation. Right? It's that kind of thing. So plan carefully. Don't leave the human component out of it. Listen to what people are telling you about what they're experiencing and make changes accordingly. Be agile about it, right? Be able to make those small adjustments as you go because otherwise you're going to wind up out in the weeds before you even realize it because this goes fast.
That's wise words. I think I'll just, instead of chiming in, I'm just going to say that's a good place to stop. So thank you, Roy Atkinson, for joining us today on the episode where we discuss what 2025 looks like. Listeners, don't forget about the humans. They are still the best sensors, regardless of what technological advancements appear. And Roy, I hope that I will see you here next year. And what we'll do then, we'll revisit these predictions and see which one of these contradictions actually came through.
I'd say, Roy was nuts last year, wasn't he?
So thank you for joining us. And all of you listeners, thank you as well for joining us. And as we say at the end of each episode, stay safe and stay happy. Thank you.
If you liked this episode, please give us thumbs up, rating, or share it with your colleagues to help others learn about this topic as well. To learn more, go to happysignals.com.